For most people, applying deodorant is one of the most automatic habits in daily life. You wake up, you shower, you reach for the stick or spray sitting on the bathroom counter. To quick swipes under each arm, done, you probably don't think about it again for the rest of the day. But here's a question most people have never asked. What exactly happens to the ingredients in deodorant after you apply them to your skin? Because unlike shampoo or soap, deodorant doesn't get rinsed off. It stays on your skin, sometimes for 12 hours, sometimes longer. And the skin under your arms is not just ordinary skin. It's one of the most absorbent areas of the body. The underarm region contains a high concentration of sweat glands, hair follicles, and blood vessels close to the surface. That combination can allow certain substances to pass through the skin barrier more easily than many people realize. Now, before we go further, it's important to be clear about something. Deodorants and antiperspirants are considered safe by regulatory agencies when used as directed. Millions of people use them every day without experiencing problems. But over the past several decades, scientists have begun studying how certain ingredients and personal care products interact with the body over time. And what they've discovered has sparked ongoing debates among dermatologists, toxicologists, and endocrinologists. Some ingredients used in deodorants may influence the microbiome of the skin, others interact with sweat glands. And a few have raised questions about how they may affect hormone signaling in the body. None of these effects happen overnight. But when something becomes part of your daily routine for years, sometimes decades, even small biological interactions can become important to understand. Today, we're going to look at 12 deodorant brands that contain ingredients researchers have studied closely for their potential effects on the body. Not because these products are necessarily dangerous, but because the chemistry happening under your arms may be more complicated than most people ever imagined. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you something. What deodorant brand have you used the longest? Many people stick with the same one for years simply because it works and smells familiar. If you're comfortable sharing, let us know in the comments. Because you might be surprised how many well-known brands contain ingredients scientists continue to study. Let's start with one of the most recognizable deodorant brands in the world. Old Spice. Old Spice antiperspirants rely on aluminum-based compounds to control sweat. These compounds work by forming temporary plugs inside sweat ducts. When the ducts are partially blocked, sweat cannot reach the surface of the skin as easily. This is how antiperspirants reduce moisture. But aluminum salts don't simply sit on the surface. They interact with proteins inside sweat ducts to create those temporary plugs. Researchers have studied this mechanism for decades. Most dermatologists consider it safe when used as directed. However, some scientists have raised questions about whether repeated long-term exposure could influence the local skin environment or the microbiome under the arms. Again, evidence linking aluminum exposure from deodorants to serious health problems remains inconclusive. But the ingredient continues to attract scientific attention because it interacts directly with one of the body's natural cooling systems, sweat. Another widely used brand is Degree. Degree antiperspirants also rely heavily on aluminum compounds, often combined with fragrance mixtures designed to mask body odor. Fragrance chemicals are one of the least transparent ingredients in personal care products. A single fragrance formula can contain dozens or even hundreds of individual chemical compounds. Many of these compounds are considered safe at low concentrations, but some have been studied for potential hormone-disrupting properties. For example, certain fragrance ingredients known as phthalates have raised questions about endocrine disruption in laboratory studies. Phthalates are used in many products to stabilize fragrance and improve scent longevity. In recent years, some manufacturers have removed phthalates from their formulations in response to consumer concerns. But fragrance mixtures remain one of the most complex and least understood aspects of cosmetic chemistry. Another familiar brand is Secret. Secret antiperspirants are marketed primarily toward women and often include aluminum salts along with moisturizing ingredients to reduce skin irritation. But some secret formulations have historically included parabens as preservatives. Parabens help prevent bacteria and mold from growing in cosmetic products. They are extremely effective and have been used safely in cosmetics for decades. However, parabens can weakly mimic estrogen in laboratory experiments. This has led some researchers to investigate whether long-term exposure could influence hormone signaling in the body. Regulatory agencies around the world still consider parabens safe within approved limits. But consumer demand for paraben-free products has increased dramatically over the past decade. Another popular deodorant brand is Dove. Dove antiperspirants often emphasize moisturizing formulas designed to protect sensitive underarm skin. But like many mainstream products, they rely on a combination of aluminum salts, fragrance compounds, and preservatives. One ingredient that sometimes appears in antiperspirant formulations is cyclopentasilicane, a type of silicone used to create a smooth texture. Silicones help deodorants glide easily across the skin. But environmental researchers have raised concerns about certain silicone compounds accumulating in ecosystems after they are washed off during bathing. This issue has led some regulators to examine the environmental persistence of specific silicone ingredients. Another brand many people recognize instantly is Axe. Axe deodorants are famous for their strong fragrances. In fact, fragrance is one of the central features of the brand. But as we mentioned earlier, fragrance blends can contain numerous chemical compounds that manufacturers are not required to list individually on labels. Some fragrance ingredients have been studied for their potential to interact with hormone receptors or trigger allergic skin reactions in sensitive individuals. Most people experience no noticeable effects. But for individuals with fragrance sensitivities, underarm products can sometimes cause irritation, redness, or itching. Then there's Gillette. Gillette antiperspirants often use aluminum zirconium compounds, a class of ingredients designed to reduce sweat more effectively than basic aluminum salts. These compounds work in a similar way by forming temporary plugs inside sweat ducts. But because they interact directly with sweat glands, researchers continue studying how they affect the underarm microbiome. The microbiome refers to the community of bacteria that naturally live on human skin. These bacteria play an important role in body odor. They break down sweat molecules and produce the compounds we recognize as odor. Antiperspirants change this environment by reducing moisture and altering bacterial populations. In some cases, this can shift the balance of bacteria living under the arms. And that shift may explain why some people notice changes in body odor when switching deodorant brands. But aluminum salts and fragrance chemicals are only part of the story. As we continue through this list, we'll look at several more deodorant brands that contain ingredients scientists continue to study, including compounds that interact with sweat glands, preservatives that affect microbial growth, and additives that may influence how chemicals pass through the skin. Because the truth is, the chemistry happening under your arms every day is far more complex than most people ever imagine. And understanding it might change the way you look at one of the most routine products in your bathroom. In the next thread, we'll continue exploring more deodorant brands and the surprising biological processes that can happen when these products become part of your daily routine for years. If you look at the ingredient label on a typical deodorant or antiperspirant, you'll usually see a long list of chemical names that most people have never heard before, and that's completely normal. Modern personal care products are carefully engineered mixtures designed to stay stable on the shelf, glide smoothly across the skin, control odor, and sometimes reduce sweat for an entire day. But when a product becomes part of your daily routine for years, sometimes decades, researchers begin asking deeper questions. Not just whether the product works, but how repeated exposure interacts with the body over time. One brand that frequently appears in discussions about deodorant ingredient is Speed Stick. Speed stick products rely heavily on aluminum-based antiperspirant compounds to reduce sweat production. But like many mass-market deodorants, they also contain stabilizers and fragrance compounds designed to maintain scent and texture. Among these ingredients are sometimes compounds classified as synthetic musks. Synthetic musks are fragrance ingredients designed to replicate the scent of natural musk. Researchers studying environmental chemistry have found that some synthetic musks can accumulate in fatty tissues and persist in the environment. The concentrations present in personal care products are considered safe by regulatory agencies, but their persistence in the environment continues to attract scientific attention. Another brand widely used across the United States is Right Guard. Right Guard antiperspirants often include propylene glycol, a compound used to help deodorant glide smoothly across the skin and improve absorption of other ingredients. Propylene glycol is also used in foods, medicines, and cosmetics as a solvent. For most people, it is considered safe. But dermatologists sometimes see skin irritation in individuals who are sensitive to it. The underarm area can be particularly prone to irritation because the skin there is thin and frequently exposed to friction from clothing. When irritation occurs, it can sometimes alter the skin barrier and allow certain ingredients to penetrate more easily. This is one reason dermatologists often recommend switching deodorant formulas if underarm irritation develops. Another familiar brand is Mitchum. Mitchum antiperspirants are marketed as clinical strength, meaning they contain higher concentrations of aluminum compounds designed to reduce heavy sweating. These stronger formulas can be very effective for people who struggle with excessive perspiration. But because they block sweat ducts more aggressively, they may also influence the underarm microbiome more significantly. Scientists studying skin bacteria have found that antiperspirants can reduce some bacterial populations while allowing others to flourish. Over time, this shift in microbial balance can sometimes change how body odor develops. It may also explain why some people experience a temporary increase in odor when they stop using antiperspirant after long-term use. The microbial community simply needs time to rebalance. Then there's Arm & Hammer deodorant. Unlike traditional antiperspirants, many Arm & Hammer formulas rely on baking soda or sodium bicarbonate to neutralize odor rather than blocking sweat. Baking soda works by changing the pH of the skin environment, making it less hospitable to odor-causing bacteria. This approach avoids aluminum compounds entirely, but baking soda can be quite alkaline. And when applied repeatedly to sensitive skin, it can sometimes disrupt the natural pH balance of the underarm area. Some users report redness, itching, or rash after extended use. This doesn't happen to everyone, but it illustrates how even natural ingredients can interact with the skin in unexpected ways. Another brand often marketed as a natural alternative is Tom's of Maine. Tom's deodorants typically avoid aluminum and instead rely on plant-derived ingredients and mineral salts to reduce odor. However, even natural deodorants use antimicrobial agents to control bacteria. Some of these agents work by altering the microbial environment under the arms. Researchers studying the skin microbiome are increasingly interested in how long-term use of antibacterial products influences microbial diversity. Our skin is home to billions of bacteria, many of which play beneficial roles in protecting against pathogens. Altering that balance repeatedly over time may have subtle effects scientists are only beginning to understand. Another brand that has attracted attention in recent years is Native. Native deodorants became extremely popular as consumers began searching for aluminum-free products. These formulas rely on combinations of baking soda, starches, and natural oils to absorb moisture and reduce odor. But as we mentioned earlier, baking soda-based formulas can sometimes irritate sensitive skin. Some users report needing to switch to baking soda-free versions after experiencing redness or itching. This highlights an important truth about personal care chemistry. Ingredients that work beautifully for one person may not work well for another. Human skin varies enormously in sensitivity, oil production, and microbial composition. And that variation means no single deodorant formula works perfectly for everyone. Another widely recognized brand is Schmidt's. Schmidt's natural deodorants use plant powders like arrowroot and charcoal to absorb moisture. They also rely heavily on essential oils for fragrance. Essential oils can provide pleasant natural scents, but they are also complex mixtures of biologically active compounds. Some individuals develop allergic reactions to certain essential oils, particularly after repeated exposure over time. Dermatologists call this phenomenon sensitization. A person may use a product for years without a problem, then suddenly develop a skin reaction because the immune system has become sensitive to one of the ingredients. And finally, there's Lume. Lume deodorants use a different strategy altogether. Rather than blocking sweat or absorbing moisture, they use acidified formulas designed to inhibit odor-producing bacteria. By lowering the pH of the skin environment, these products make it more difficult for odor-causing microbes to thrive. This approach reflects a newer understanding of body odor. Odor doesn't come from sweat itself. Sweat is mostly water and salt. Odor occurs when bacteria break down certain molecules in sweat and produce volatile compounds. By targeting the bacteria instead of the sweat glands, products like Lume attempt to control odor while allowing the body to sweat normally. But even this strategy changes the chemistry of the underarm environment. Lowering skin pH alters microbial populations and may influence how bacteria interact with sweat components. Researchers studying the skin microbiome are only beginning to explore how these changes affect long-term skin health. And that brings us to the bigger picture. When scientists talk about products changing body chemistry, they rarely mean dramatic changes to the entire body. Instead, they're referring to subtle shifts in local biological environments, changes in the skin microbiome, changes in sweat gland activity, changes in the chemical interactions happening on the surface of the skin. These changes are usually small, and for most people, they don't cause noticeable health problems. But they remind us of something important. The human body is an incredibly dynamic system. Every substance we apply to the skin interacts with that system in some way. Most of the time, those interactions are harmless. Sometimes they're beneficial. But understanding them helps us make more informed choices about the products we use every day. Because deodorant may seem like one of the simplest products in your bathroom, but behind that small stick or spray bottle is an entire world of chemistry happening quietly on the surface of your skin. And the more we learn about that chemistry, the more we realize just how fascinating and complex our everyday routines really are. So the next time you reach for your deodorant in the morning, take a quick glance at the ingredient label. You don't need to memorize every chemical name, but knowing that those ingredients are interacting with your skin and your microbiome might make you appreciate the science behind one of the smallest steps in your daily routine. Sometimes the most ordinary habits turn out to involve the most interesting chemistry.